What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Emerson Lazio holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We're brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. Great show coming up for you guys. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us the 5-star rating, and check us out live here Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, DraftKings YouTube channel, and more. Some good guests coming up today. ESPN's Mina is going to stop by and chop up some NFL with us as we get ready for a weekend where we got Saturday and Sunday football. And we've got Tom Haberstroh, great NBA analyst who you can check out, going to help us break down some of the tendencies we've seen amongst officiating and amongst some of these suspensions. Because, Dad, good God almighty, the NBA is like, are you guys doing okay right now? After what we've seen in the last couple of days, we got the word finally last night that Draymond Green was not just suspended for going and turning and slapping a player in their most recent game. No. Draymond Green, who turned around, smacked Yusuf Nurkic with an open hand, was ejected from that game against the Suns, was suspended indefinitely by the NBA, according to ESPN NBA analyst Adrian Wojnarowski. And, Dad, this is where it's really interesting for me, is the way the NBA is trying to frame this right now. According to the report from Woj, Draymond Green, the Warriors GM Mike Dunleavy Jr., and Green's agent Rich Paul are expected to meet Thursday, today, to start discussing a path of counseling and help for Green to move forward, according to sources. The league didn't want to put a specific number on the suspension, but allow Green to take the time he might need to deal with the challenges he's facing. Have you ever heard anything like this around a suspension like this?
No, I think basically this was their wording for it, but basically they're like, what are we going to do with this guy? I mean, let's just suspend him and let him sit, and then we'll decide. So we don't have to make the decision right now on the number of games. Let's just suspend him indefinitely. It's his 6th suspension, his 2nd this year. He played 9 games, then got suspended for 5 games, then played 6 games, and is now suspended indefinitely. So his 6th suspension. And Mike, you heard Nurkic after the game said, I hope the guy gets help. And now this is an opponent, someone he struck and all that. But I'll say Kevin Durant said the same thing. Kevin Durant played with Draymond Green. And Kevin Durant was asked about it after, that's another story. They had the big three back together for the first game in Phoenix and promptly lost. But Kevin Durant was asked about Draymond, and he said almost word for word what Nurkic said. He said, I hope he gets the help he needs. So this is a guy who played with him, a guy who knows him. So that puts maybe a little more, it's different than an opponent, like I said. So I don't know, in your eyes, did that change it a little bit of, maybe this guy does need help. Maybe it's kind of the guy that you maybe want as a teammate, but then don't want to play against if you're not a teammate, right? Because even if you're a teammate, those guys have seen it. Clay and Kerr and Steph have seen it, and I'm sure it's just kind of as I said the other day, a roll your eye moment of, dude, we love the toughness, but you're killing us here.
Well, I mean, Jordan Poole saw it firsthand. He got punched in the face. Like, that's what I mean. This has been something that has been inextricably a part of Draymond Green's career and fabric. And you're right. There's the difficulty. And I remember it. And, Dad, this is what, to me, struck me about where we're at with this and that response. Because you're absolutely right. Hearing that response, it does make you wonder. And, like, a general empathy that I think I've developed more and more as I've gotten older and older is, all right, you do wonder if there's something that he hasn't dealt with here, because in sports as well as I do, Dad, when you're good at something and it works, not only for you, but for the teams that are either employing you or giving you a scholarship or whatever, they're benefiting from your skill set. There's a pretty big tendency to just say, all right, well, if it works and you're playing well on the court here, we'll find a way to deal with it. We'll find a way to push it through. It'll become the next person's problem, and we won't really deal with it, because if you need it to succeed out there, who are we to stop you from doing that? And for Draymond Green at every level, his level of red-hot intensity in his mind, for a guy that's not the biggest, fastest, or strongest player on any level he's ever played on, maybe outside of high school, this is in what his mind has helped get him to this point. And it's been rewarded with championships. It's been rewarded with accolades. It's been rewarded with money. And so I'm sure, and at times I saw Ryan Russillo was talking about interviewing him at the All-Star game one year, and Draymond almost laughed off the notion that he could be one without the other, because in his mind, the whole package of who he is how he got to this point. And so I think for a lot of guys, it's probably hard to pull out of that after a long time when you factor in that he got suspended for this in an NBA Finals game, in a game that his team lost, in a series that they ultimately lost, and it still didn't deter him from this behavior. And Dad, you know as well as I do, we generally tend to think when you take the game away from an athlete, that's the only thing that's going to crystallize it for him. So once that didn't happen, I struggled to see a world where anything got through to Draymond.
Plus, how are you going to stop down on a guy and say you got to knock this off when his way of playing mixed in with the rest of the team, they got a bunch of rings on their hand. So they were getting the payoff of all their play, but his kind of play. So you know you're going to be like, oh, yeah, at that when you're winning, yeah, tough player, I know, sometimes crosses the line, but hey, we'll put another ring on. But, you know, now they're not that team anymore. They're a really good team, and now we're talking about when is the big three going to end. But, you know, if they're trying to keep this thing together, they're still very talented, and where can they go? But as Steve Kerr said, we need him. We need Draymond, and he knows that. We've talked to him. He's got to find a way to keep his poise and be out there for his teammates. And part of that we always talk about, Mike, if someone has an issue, do they recognize that? And Draymond Green's response to what Steve Kerr said, like I said, if I intended to do that, then I would feel awful not being out there. But my intentions were just to sell the foul. I mean, he, in his mind, that's what I was trying to do, not whip around and just smoke somebody in the side of the head. So he's not going to change. And I think they know that in Golden State. This is something that you got to say. You know, you hope he's going to change, but it's been going on for too many years, and it's his way. And, oh, by the way, it's been successful because he has rings, a guy that flirts with the line. He's not the first to flirt with the line or the last to flirt with the line. He's just not. But it just gets emphasized and magnified more and more as time goes on, as they're not the team they used to be. And now it kind of gets looked at as, oh, there's an issue because, you know, we're not one of the best teams in the NBA anymore, where you kind of push everything to the side.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult part for me, Dad, because you brought up his teammates wanting him to, you know, former teammates, opponents, saying, man, I hope he gets the help he wants. And again, general empathy, I want to believe that everybody can change, that Draymond Green, maybe time away, would give him an opportunity to look in and say, why am I doing this stuff? Can I change this behavior? But you're right, and this is a lot of what we see overall in sports. I saw a lot of people liken this to the suspension that we saw for Ja Morant last year, where he went away for a weekend and they talked about all this perspective-changing stuff he did, and then he came right back to playing basketball, and we're saying how much can really change in that short amount of time, especially when, for so many athletes, when they're put in this spot, the things that we hear publicly from them do not match up with this idea of rehabilitation. Sounds like too strong of a word, but actual change in these situations. It sounds like Draymond even here saying, I don't think, you know, I have a problem here. Like, I was trying to sell a foul. This wasn't me lashing out. This wasn't me doing anything wrong. And if you are hearing that, which doesn't sound like true contrition, it sounds like a guy saying, yeah, I'm sorry just because I was doing a basketball thing that you guys misconstrued, then I struggle to see, based on the rest of his career, how long he's been at it, and to your point, how long it's been successful for him. I struggle to see a world where this changes. And so it feels like PR fluff from the NBA side. And maybe that's because I'm wired to not trust leagues when they try and sell us, oh, we're going to give a guy structure. Like, no, you guys are trying to go out here, do the thing that's going to make you look best to the league, your partners, the people watching, and then keep it moving.
Guys, Draymond Green has as many suspensions this season as the Pistons have wins. So those two are neck and neck right now.
I mean, neck and neck's the appropriate way to say it too, Dad, because I've forgotten, and this is how crazy the world and how fast the world moves. I've forgotten, oh, by the way, that first suspension was when he choked out Rudy Gobert. He put a 7-foot Frenchman in a headlock, and that is somehow the less, I mean, that probably is still the winner in the clubhouse right now in terms of Draymond injections.
So what's the answer here? The league says you're suspended until so he has time he needs to deal with the challenges he's facing. So that's about as gray as could be, because now look at it from the player's side. First off, Draymond doesn't admit he did anything wrong, but he's smart enough to understand, and I'll say also he will not be the first to have ever done this. Oh yeah, I understand, I'm good now. He'll say what he needs to say without really admitting guilt in this, because he has not backed off of it. I was just trying to get the foul. But he is going to end up saying what he needs to say to get back on the court. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because I would do that, you would do that, and a lot of other people are going to do that because they want to get back and play. So this is such a gray area. There's nothing concrete that says go meet with this therapist. You can get back on the court when you meet with that person 10 times. I mean, and I'm being facetious
right.
there. They're not going to do that. But there's no concrete time or number to this. So I think a lot of it is going to be on the thought of contrition or understanding from Draymond, which at some point he's going to give you his version of, to say, I'm cool, I get it, let me go back on the court so I'm not losing $153,941 a game.
Damn.
Yeah, I think that's kind of everyone's general premise on this. And again, I understand, the lovey part of me always wants to say, people can change. You hope this is that moment for him. But the reality of what we've seen, again, the guy missed a finals game and his team lost the series and nothing happened in the world of sports. He kept it moving. He kept acting like this. And so I struggle to see a world where at this point in his career that changes meaningfully. And we'll see. At some point he'll be back on the court. The NBA's regular season is still a long time. And so missing a few of these games sucks for the paychecks for him, no doubt. But overall for this team and some of the larger questions and problems they face right now. I mean, Andrew Wiggins and Clay both playing poorly at this point of the season. Golden State's got a lot of stuff that they need to work out under the hood with that team. They're not the only ones, though, that had a weird time in the association last night, Emerson. We thought we were just going to have your normal run-of-the-mill star player does incredible things story with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then things went sideways in a hurry after that one, too.
Yeah, so he scores a career-high 64 points, talking Greek Freak here, against the Pacers last night. And the entire story ended up being about the actual physical game ball here. So the Greek Freak wanted it. The Pacers, it appeared, had taken it. Giannis went furiously sprinting into the Pacers tunnel here. That is a large man running at you, okay? Imagine that. Quite scary. And then Rick Carlisle, as he called it, a fracas broke out, leaving Pacers GM Chad Buchanan, according to Carlisle, with bruised ribs after he was elbowed by a Bucks player. Listen to this.
There's a misunderstanding about the game ball. It was Oscar Tshiebwe's first official NBA point, so we always get the game ball. We were not thinking about Giannis's franchise record, so we grabbed the ball, and a couple of minutes later, several of their players ended up in our hallway, and there was a big I don't know what to call it, a fracas, melee, whatever. I don't think any punches were landed, but my general manager got elbowed in the ribs by one of their players. And so he certainly has a bruised rib, and who knows, if it's anything more than that. But unfortunate situation.
Dude, give the ball to Oscar Tshiebwe.
There aren't many times in life where you get to use the word fracas, right?
Oh, that's my era, man. Yes, love it.
I like kerfuffle. I'm a big kerfuffle guy.
Fracas and melee. That's my good job out of you, Rick. Way to pull those out.
Well, he went melee too, like he was Bryce Harper talking about memes.
Yeah. So let's look at this situation, right? First off, Antetokounmpo was 2 points. The record was Michael Redd in 06, scored 57. And I believe at 55 points, Giannis got rotated out of the game. He said it was my normal time to go out, and they were winning this game big, so he wasn't going to go back in. And it was the coach who said, hey, go back in the game. And he's like, no. He said, you're 2 points away from the franchise record. And Giannis said he told the coach, no, I'm good. He had already scored 54 one time this season against the Pacers, by the way. So you figure at some point with his ability, he was going to get there. But he ended up going back in, gets 64, shoots 20 at 28, and hits 24 free throws. It was absolutely amazing. And what was weird is he said he wanted the ball to give to Dame Lillard, who passed Kyle Korver for number 5 on the list for most threes made in your career. So you got 3 different situations here, Mike. You got Oscar Tshiebwe, who scored his first points in the NBA, which, by the way, was literally that. He scored 1 point. 1 point. So it was literally his first point, but it was his first point. You have Giannis, who has now the franchise record of 64 points, and you have Dame, who is now 5th on the all-time list in threes made. So 3 variations. I don't know the protocol in the NBA, Mike, of where the game ball goes. The game was in Milwaukee. They kind of really showed how the ball got transferred. I don't know how that works, but who gets the game ball? Who should get the game ball in this one?
So I look at this situation and say I think it should go to Oscar Tshiebwe for his first NBA point, because we don't know what his career is going to be at this point. We don't know how many more milestone moments he's going to have. Dame and Giannis have a ton of them right now. Like, both of these are great, right? The Bucks all-time franchise leader in single-game points. Yep. That's not something to shake a stick at. You love that, and I'm sure for Giannis, who's been the face of this franchise for a while, that's meaningful, but he's got championships. He's got MVPs. He's got plenty of things to hang his hat on now and plenty more in the future. Same goes for Dame Lillard. Like, 5th on that list is great, but Dame's also a guy with a lot of accomplishments, all-NBA 75 player, and so my thought would be, hey, let's give it to the guy who did his first and could be his only big-time accomplishment in pro basketball. We don't know. We root for Oscar Tshiebwe. We hope he's got a great long career, but I would go with him. Who would you go with?
I would definitely go with Tshiebwe, number 1. In my rank him in order, it would be Tshiebwe, Giannis, and Dame.
Yep, that's the correct order. That's the only order.
Tshiebwe, again, we know nothing about this guy. At least the casual fan really doesn't. He got his first point. Man, that happens one time, right? As I said, Giannis had 54. Giannis, if he didn't get the record, was probably going to get the record, and he's going to go down as one of the greatest of all time. And while, listen, I don't want to, pat down what, Damian Lillard, 5 all-time on a list in a sport is phenomenal, but compared to these other things, I'll say it's 5th. When he gets to 3rd, I would move him up on this list. 2nd or 1st. If he all of a sudden he would pass Steph Curry, I might give him the game ball. The only thing is that would go back and forth if it was Steph, because Steph's still playing. So I'd go Tshiebwe here for sure. Emerson, I'm sure you're the same way.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Give him the ball. But here's also the thing. Buck security went and grabbed the ball, right? Gave it to Giannis.
Yes.
And then Giannis is like, I don't even believe this is the ball. I played 35 minutes tonight. I know what a game ball feels like. This is not the game ball. So he wasn't even happy after he received the ball.
Yeah, he gave him the Liam Neeson from Taken line. You forget the weight in the hand of a gun that's loaded and one that's not right now. I know the weight of the game ball that I just played with here. I will say my biggest takeaway from all of this that we've seen around the NBA in the last few days, in-season tournament worked too well. Like, these guys can't turn it off now. We said we wanted more competitive regular season. We said we wanted more stars out there, and now they're choking and slapping people. They're fighting over game balls in the tunnel. We may have inadvertently created a Pacers-Bucks rivalry out of this as well, since they played in the in-season tournament. So Adam Silver got what he wanted and then some, and now it's broken contain.
So I want to know what was said. If you watch the highlights of this, you see a Milwaukee Buck personnel with the ball after the game ball. They's actually highlighted. And then a Pacers, the kid looks 10 years old. I mean, who came up to him, at least when I looked at it quickly. And I don't know what he said. That's who needs to be interviewed. What he said to the Milwaukee Buck person, but then the dude gave him the ball. And dude went out with it to give to Tshiebwe. So I'd like to know what that quick conversation was between those personnel people.
The oral history of the almost Bucks-Pacers brawl coming to an ESPN 30 for 30 near you, I would imagine. Coming up next, though, is a trip to the NFL league meetings and some rules on the table no longer about to be broken.
most of the NFL fans around the world really looking forward to the upcoming playoffs just 4 weeks away. The league's owners and stakeholders convening in Dallas yesterday, NFL owners meetings addressing a host of issues here that will affect the NFL really in both the near and short-term future here. So NFL brass Roger Goodell and Troy Vincent, guys, check this out, addressing, this is one of the many issues on the table, the criticism of officiating this season, specifically as it relates to the offsides call in the Chiefs-Bills game. So Goodell's saying on the Kadarius Toney offsides call, I think almost everybody has acknowledged that the officials are absolutely correct. That's their job to call it a foul. I think it shows you how difficult it is to do their job. So other rules issues that were discussed and brought up yesterday at the meeting, including the tush push, the hip drop tackle, and then that fumble through the end zone resulting in a touchback rule, which I believe, GoJo, you were tweeting about, worst rule in professional sports. What stood out to you guys the most?
Well, Dad, I wanted to get your perspective on this because I know we've talked about it on the show a little bit, and I heard a lot of people having strong reactions to the hip drop tackle stuff and the current state of football for defensive players because they pointed to the injury rate for this, which according to NFL research is 20 to 25 times the risk of a traditional tackle. We've seen anecdotally this year Mark Andrews and other players lost to it. It's the same basic action as the horse collar that the NFL banned. But Dad, is this the right move? Would banning that be going too far given how difficult life is already for defensive players?
I'm just like, how far can we go? I mean, you're trying to stop a player from gaining extra yards. So I get the horse collar. We've seen the injuries. I understand, but that players were doing that. Sometimes they had to reach out and that's all they could grab. But now this hip drop tackle stops the forward momentum. As I think it was Troy Vincent said, we don't want to stop the tackling from behind. Well, yeah, okay. I mean, you have to tackle in this game. Thank you for not wanting to stop the tackling from behind. But there is a greater risk of injury, and I get it. I understand that. Listen, there was the play for the and I don't know what you old lineman called it, but if I lined up over the guard and the guard reached hard right and the tackle just threw at my legs.
Yeah.
You know, and they outlawed that. That was actually one for the defense. They weren't just letting you throw at the legs like that. So I know they want to stop injury. You're never going to stop all injury, but you can try and, minimize or mitigate it a bit. But I mean, it's a play, Mike, where you know what they're doing. They're trying to stop the momentum. They're trying not to give them any extra yards. If you're doing this and when a guy is trying to get one more yard for a first down, if you can't do this and just bring him down from behind, he's going to carry you for 2 more yards, 3 more yards. So this is a way to kind of stop that. So I think we're getting into dangerous waters. And man, I mean, it's such a bang play as well, giving the officials another thing to kind of look at. And people say, well, that's easy to see when they're doing it. Well, yeah, the very blatant ones are, but there's some that aren't as blatant that now is going to be subjective to a referee for them to try and call something else on the field. So, man, I don't know how far we can go.
Is this something that's like a taught thing? Like, because it's gotten a name, so I think people are looking at it as though it's a taught technique, which, I wasn't a defensive player past high school, but can't ever remember being taught to tackle in this kind of way. We know the NFL had the whole rugby tackle thing that the Seahawks made popular years ago in terms of an alternative form to try and take the head out of tackling. But as we've gone along here, like, Dad, is this just a reaction for defensive guys? Is this something that's a conscious thing in your mind? How do you view this?
It's taught would mean also practice, and you're never practicing this. Nobody's practicing this move on the field, that's for sure, on Wednesday or Thursday. So that's not happening. I think, Mike, it just evolved to this to say, okay, if we do this, we stop their momentum. We stop them from going forward, and giving them extra yards. So it's a way to the best way, or one of the best ways when you're tackling from the side or behind, to stop their forward momentum. So I think it happened. I think players saw it, and then the defensive player said, okay, this is a good way to not get taken for a ride for a few yards. And, I'm sure we're going to hear, well, tackle better. Just stop, okay? There's a ton of different angles on a field where you can get to a ball carrier. It's not cut and dry. It's not painting by the numbers on how you do it. So you got to get a guy down. So I think it just happened, Mike, and other defensive players saw it and said, okay, this is a good way to stop that forward progress. It got the name of the hip drop because that's exactly what you're doing. When I see it, I kind of cringe because you're not sure if someone's getting hurt, kind of just like the horse collar, and nobody wants to see anybody get hurt at all. So there's part of me that says, man, if you can prove, again, their research says 20 to 25 times more dangerous than a regular tackle. Are there numbers to this? I don't know, because when we get to the brotherly shove, they don't have enough injury numbers to really, I think, change this thing.
Sure.
But here you wonder if they do, or if it just looks so gruesome and you lose a guy for a while that they're going to outlaw it. But man, just making it even more difficult on the defenders now.
Yeah, I would agree visually and what we know, because again, it's the same basic action as the horse collar that we all looked at and said, yeah, that makes sense as to why you would try and outlaw that and limit that in the game. And you are absolutely right. That comparison with the O-lineman was the first thing I thought of. It was my old teammate Ian Williams was one of the guys that was the impetus for that rule, D-lineman for the 49ers back in the early aughts, who got his ankle broken on a play where one of the O-linemen would be posting a guy up and the other would come and clean him out from the backside in what used to be a legal cut. And offensive linemen everywhere said, well, you're going to affect the way that we run outside zone. You're going to eliminate that play from football. And the league said, we don't care. You've hurt too many guys this way.
Right.
And we can't operate with this. And lo and behold, guys adjusted. People have found a way. It didn't stop the play from being in NFL playbooks, much the same way I think defensive players would adjust here. But I do understand a sensitivity to defensive players overall, Dad, because of the way the game has changed, which is interesting. And where this is manifest too is we have lived long enough, and I did not expect this. The NFL said it was also taking a look at the fumble out of the back of the end zone. Now, they've looked at it in the past, and they've not changed anything, where if you're an offensive player and you fumble out of the back of the end zone, it's a touchback and the other team gets the ball. This used to be, when I was coming up and watching you on Mike and Mike, that just used to be the universally most hated rule in football. Everybody thought it was dumb. I've seen a lot of people defending it now, Dad, under the guise of, well, defensive players need something. Where are you at? Do you still think as a defensive player this is a dumb rule?
Oh, I hate the rule. I think it's a horrible rule. Mark Murphy, the president of the Green Bay Packers, said it's way too punitive for the offensive team. You're driving all the way down the field, you fumble, the ball gets knocked out of the back of the end zone, you lose the ball when nobody had possession. I think listen, you're right, for a league where everything seems to be against the defense, this one is actually for the defense, but I don't like the rule. I think the only rule I hated more than that, and they changed it, was when the receiver jumped in the air by the sideline and caught the ball. If the defender pushed him out of bounds, but the referee felt if the defender didn't push him down out of bounds, he would have landed inbounds complete. That was the dumbest rule of all time. That why have a defender? That one made me scream more than this one. But I think this one should change. I think it will change. The brotherly shove, they said there's not enough sampling of players being injured, so you shouldn't punish a team for being successful at it. So while I don't think the league loves it, I don't think they have the ability or enough info to change it. I think that stays. I think the fumble out of the end zone changes. And I do think, Mike, they end up outlawing the hip drop tackle. Just to your point, players adjust. You find another way to do something. It'll be another thing against the defense. But when you're seeing injuries like this, the league is going to take action.
Junior, did you know at one point in the history of the game, an incomplete pass that landed in the end zone resulted in a touchback and possession for the defense? That was a thing in the NFL.
It's got ties to like a dated rule. Yeah. It's ridiculous in where it comes from. I understand we treat the end zone different for so many things in football, but everywhere else on the field, you fumble out of bounds, goes back to the spot of the fumble here, and we keep it moving. It's something that incentivizes scoring, which we know the league loves a good dose of offense, and so you're trying to get guys to actually score more, and this would curb them away the other way. So I think you're right on that prediction, Dad. I think we could see those two things change. I'm glad that cooler heads prevailed with the brotherly shove. The league spelled it out for you. The rest of you aren't as good at it as the Eagles, and that's not an excuse to get rid of it. So go and sit with that all off season and think about the complaining you've done.
Chargers and Raiders on Thursday Night Football from Vegas, a clash of 5 and 8 teams, another epic battle on Thursday Night Football, one that only will be made better by betting it on the DraftKings Sportsbook, ladies and gentlemen. There you go, baby. Come on, I'm a company man. You know that. So we have Vegas favored by 3 at home. Game total down to, well, now up to 34.5. All right, everybody. Points expected? Who knows? All right, so Easton Stick going to be under center for the Chargers. Raiders here after just being shut out 3-0 by the Vikings. They're going to have Aiden O'Connell under center. There's no Keenan Allen for the Chargers. This is going to be a mess. Josh Jacobs is questionable here. So guys like Max Crosby, everyone's like, hey, just shut everybody down. You don't really have much to play for. Max Crosby does not like that idea.
You know, there's a lot of bull going around talking about, you know, shutting people down because of this and that, but that's a bunch of bull. At the end of the day, we play and train all year round to play at 17 guaranteed. So that's what we plan on doing. We got to finish the season strong, so it's literally one at a time. Quick turnaround with the Chargers, so we're definitely looking forward to getting out there again.
Okay, can't confirm. Max Crosby, not a fan of shutting things down for players, huh? Get out there and play.
I'm telling you, this guy could have the highest motor I have ever seen. He is nonstop. And he's a guy who's had, you know, some tough life with the alcohol and fighting that and being sober now. I mean, he's had what we call real life battles, right? Mm-hmm. Real stuff going on where while everybody says, football's a game, it is a game, but it was our job. You know, it was how we made a living. It was our job. It's what we did. But still, compared to what he had gone through, man, he plays a game at a high motor, and don't ever. You know what the 2 biggest swear words to him would be if he were in the NBA would be load management. Dude doesn't know what that is. He only knows how to go 1,000 miles an hour. He is a inspiration, a great model for younger players coming into the league to see. They always say, what do the older players owe the younger players? You know, do you sit them down? Do you teach them? There are some that will do that, but others show by their actions. You see how this guy practices, how this guy plays. You hear he's like this in practice as well. I mean, it's one of the greatest teaching things to young players. When I remember my dad, when I came in the league, said, keep your mouth shut and your ears and your eyes open. Watch how the veterans do it because they've been there. And, man, you watch how this guy approaches work and approaches games. It is something else.
Tied for 3rd in the league with 13.5 sacks going into this game is that Max Crosby. So, yeah, one of the single most impactful defensive players we have in football right now, the combination of motor and everything else. And, Dad, if you're looking for the sell for this game, that's probably where it is, right? We always joke about who they put up for the graphics when they promote a game during another game. On a prior Thursday nighter when they were promoting the Patriots and Steelers game, they famously put up TJ Watt and Bill Belichick. They could not find a player from New England that they felt was worthy of promotion, so they put up Bill Belichick, who everyone in New England is trying to unceremoniously show the door right now. For this one, it's pretty clear. It is Max Crosby and it is Khalil Mack. Almost no one else is healthy. Josh Jacobs, is questionable for this game. We know the backup quarterbacks are going to be in. Star receivers might not be available. But you've got Max Crosby on one side, and then Khalil Mack, who, oh, by the way, the last time these teams played back in Week 4, set the Chargers' single-game record with 6 sacks in that game as he leads the NFL with 15 overall. So at the very least, Dad, coming off a 3-0 rock fight from the Raiders this past weekend, we could be due for an encore on Thursday night.
And then Easton Stick, and I love his, what he's saying. He should be confident. As he said, he's used to winning from his college days. But we know Mike Williams has been gone. Now Keenan Allen out. I mean, poor dude coming in where no weapons. I mean, Keenan Allen has 108 receptions. The next closest is the running back, Austin Eckler, at 36. So I think someone's been a big part of the offense, and he is not now there for Easton Stick. So Eckler is your next leading receiver. Then the tight end, Gerald Everett. You know, you've got Quentin Johnston up there who, I mean, the people he's going to have to rely on, he would love to have a running game, but at this point of the season, you're right, teams that are out of it and teams dealing with injuries. So Easton Stick knows what he's playing for, though. I mean, you want the team win, but he knows what he's playing for. You keep playing for your position in the league.
Yeah, like he ran the hell out of the football in college. If you look at Easton Stick's numbers, like in 2018, his last year, he had 17 rushing touchdowns, and then he had 12 in 2017. He's played in 12 preseason games, and he has 5 rushing touchdowns there. So you know for sure that they're going to take advantage of the work he could do with his feet tonight. Maybe look at a rushing prop for him as well.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing is if you're watching this, trying to predict the outcome is kind of going to be a crapshoot. To that point, there's a chance for some newness like we saw with the New York Giants and their use of Tommy DeVito, Dad, where you had the Green Bay Packers that seemed completely caught off guard by the notion that they would use him as a rusher there to the tune of, I think, 78 rushing yards for Tommy DeVito. And that's where I struggle in this one is you've got the newness of Easton Stick to where you might be able to catch the Raiders defense a little bit off guard and that they don't have a lot of tape on this guy versus on the other side for the Raiders, you could spin it and say, hey, Aiden O'Connell's at least been under center for a while with them. You're dealing with a guy who, yes, is a backup quarterback, but has also played a bunch of games for the Raiders as a starter at this point in the season. And so he walks in with that experience, even though Josh Jacobs hasn't practiced all week, Devontae Adams hasn't practiced all week, and we have no idea who he's actually going to try and get the ball to out there in the midst of all that. So I don't know. If you ask me to pick on this one, Emerson, who'd you say was favored again?
It's Vegas. Vegas is favored at home by 3 points.
If you ask me, I would probably take the Chargers plus the points in this one, Dad. Wouldn't feel good about any of it.
Yeah, I think I would take the Raiders in this one. And again, I've been in this position to where both teams are 5-8. And now, while you sit there and say, well, they're only 2 losses out of a possible wild, they're not making the playoffs. You know, and players inside the room, while certainly that's what they will spout publicly, I've talked about this a lot of the end of the season of where you are as a player. What's your status on the team? And you're talking about already a team that could get a new head coach in the Raiders, the speculation of what may go on with the Chargers. So as a player, you have to understand, what am I playing for and who am I playing for? Who am I showing this tape to? Who's going to see this tape? Is it going to be a brand new coach with a brand new position coach I'm going to have? Because remember, Mike, you know this, it's not always about the head coach because players deal with their position coach way more than the head coach. Yep. So who would be the new position coach? How are they going to look at my film? I need to be playing hard to show that I can either still be here or I'm auditioning for another team. There's a lot that goes on in the last 2 weeks of the season, and your team's out of it. Some players, while physically they don't have it hitched up, we're talking about they got the U-Haul hitched to the car, where they're showing up an hour later than they used to and not working out. They're not staying later and watching film and preparing fully for the game. So there's a lot of individuals out here in different situations on how they approach this game, looking to their future in the league.
Under 34.5 looks quite tasty, gentlemen, after the Raiders got shut out last week, losing 3-0, and now against a backup quarterback at home. And they've been playing some pretty stout defense under Antonio Pierce since he became interim head coach.
Yeah, to the tune of this dubious stat. The Chargers, losers of 4 of their past 5 games. The Raiders, losers of their last 3 games here. So, stoppable force meeting movable object. Something's got to give here. Dad's going Raiders. I'm going Chargers. Emerson looks like he has an interesting thing to say.
Well, yeah, Vegas 4-2-1 ATS at home this season. So, hey, listen, screw winning. Just cover, baby, right?
So this is what I love about Emerson. I just give a spiel on what the athletes are thinking and going through when your season's kind of over from a team standpoint and what's going through their minds. Right to Emerson. You know, the over-under on this is 34.5. You know, so what?
Hey. That is,
but quite honestly,
the ultimate version of that is showbiz, baby.
Yes, more people are probably could care less what I'm saying about these athletes and more with Emerson giving them the line on this thing.
I'm here to help, guys.
You know what, though? That's you give and you give and you give. Coming up next, though, let's go from pro to college here. We have talked about one hypothetical scenario in college sports for a while since the portal and NIL and opt-out showed up. It's finally arrived here. How do we reckon with it next? So, Dad, ever since the transfer portal, since player opt-outs in bowl games started, since really the college football playoff took hold, and the idea of quote-unquote meaningless bowl games came up with opt-outs, we always talked about eventually we would get to a point where you'd have some player opting out from a team that's involved in the college football playoff. We thought it was going to be in the expanded playoffs that we got started next year, where you've got more teams in the party, teams with varying actual chances of winning a title, and guys still having to weigh their pro prospects against that. We apparently didn't have to wait until that point right now. We got news yesterday from Pete Thamel over at ESPN that Texas Longhorns backup quarterback Malik Murphy is entering the NCAA transfer portal. Murphy said in a phone interview that he will not be with the Longhorns in the college football playoff and that the decision was wrenching to him. He said, quote, I hate it. I'm super invested in this team. Everything we've done along the way and all the work we've put in together, it's hard to walk away, especially at this point in the season. Remember, he started a pair of home games for Texas this year when Quinn Ewers was hurt. He got wins over BYU and Kansas State in that game. But, Dad, he's got 3 years of eligibility left. There's talk that Quinn Ewers might come back next year for the Longhorns. You've got Arch Manning there staring down behind him. And so he wants to get somewhere in play. And because of the transfer portal that opens up at the beginning of December and closes on January 4th, he's really got no other choice in terms of if he wants to do something right for his future. But unfortunately, it comes at the expense of his team. He's got to do it right now, Dad. So what do you make of this scenario that we talked about for so long now that we're seeing it play out in real time?
And it's only going to happen with more teams next year, playoff teams, right? When we go to 12, you'll probably see this more. He said, given the time it will take for visits and to assure that he finds the right spot for his future, that's why he left Texas now. So you wonder, because this number is going to grow. There is no doubt about that. It's going to grow when you go to 12 teams in the playoffs. Will they? And that's what we're looking for here. This would be the way to alleviate that, right? Would be to change the portal times, correct? I mean, that would be the way to do it. So, I mean, there's that question, and then there's, all the old schoolers out there, and I'll continue to say not every old school thing is wrong. I think you can mix old school and new school. But, people are going to say, because you read his quotes, his decision came down to doing what's best for my future. It's that simple. I want to go to a place where I can play, continue to get better. And people will say, win the job there, compete there, try and be the guy there. And, it's so easy to sit on the outside and say that, even from former players, who are, maybe more old school guys. But these guys have X amount, 4 or 5 years to show their wares, and he wants to get on the field, he wants to play. And I don't blame him one bit. And this is how the rules are right now, and he's following them the way it's going to help him best. If you're going to decide to do that, then you have to do what's best for you. And that's what he's doing, but it does interrupt all of a sudden with the uh-oh moment of, wait, this is a playoff team. And a guy who was one play away from being the man for that team to try and carry them is now not there. So, yeah, I do think they're going to have to move that date because, as I said, this will only expand.
Yeah, I think right now we talk so much about the things going on in college football and whether it's, people wanting to put guardrails on NIL or limit transfer options for people overall, which, by the way, a huge win yesterday for players on that front in a court case that basically for the next 2 weeks temporarily suspended any penalty for second-time transfers, opening it up so that any player looking to transfer for a second time would do so without penalty, without having to sit out. This is a temporary injunction on that one, but seems like it's opening the door. So we don't have any Tez Walker situations like we had for North Carolina this year. Guys would be immediately eligible. The NCAA's power is falling down around them and closing in on them slowly but surely. But, Dad, the one thing we do look at, and I can say seems to be the problem, is the calendar right now for college football is all out of whack. We mentioned the fall transfer period is from December 4th to January 2nd, right in the middle of bowl season. Also coincides with the early signing day that got instituted before all of this was a reality, complicating the picture with high school recruits as well. And so, Dad, I think something's got to change. I don't know what that is right off the bat here, but I think if you're college football and you've talked about and people have worried about these games are going to start to look more and more unfamiliar in the postseason. You're going to have what we have now, more and more players in the portal, backups and underclassmen largely that haven't seen the field, proliferating bowl games. I think you've got to try and move this around in a way that's fair to the players so that a guy like Malik Murphy doesn't have to make a decision like this about his future at the expense of potentially getting a national championship ring, Emerson.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think now, over the next, 2 weeks, we could see like any number of college football players enter the transfer portal for the second time to kind of take advantage of this ruling right now.
I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is to have the foresight to change this and have the foresight to understand just what I said earlier. You're going to 12 teams.
Yeah.
So right now this is ISO, this is one. Now you have who's a Tyler Buckner is going to transfer from Alabama, who's in the playoffs, but he's staying with the team throughout the playoffs and he's transferring to play lacrosse. So he's still with the team. Malik is not. And as I said, even though he's a backup, he's one play away from being the leader of that team in the playoffs. So as I said, this will only magnify with a 12-team playoff. So there's got to be some foresight to say, okay, this is going to turn into a bigger issue. The teams that are in the playoffs may not be the full-strength team that we're putting in the playoffs in that last committee meeting that we have, as players are going to enter the portal. But where do you go, Mike, for this? I mean, is it something you need to ask the coaches about, what works best for them in this situation? I mean, what works best for the player in this situation? I mean, it's who you're going to ask and how quickly you can gather this information before you see more of this next year.
So the difficult part for me on this and trying to couch this out is the easy thing would be to say, blow the transfer window past when the national championship is, allow guys even after that to be able to make this decision. But then if you're the player sitting in there, Dad, there's part of me that wonders, all right, if you keep this open for the rest of the time and you're Malik Murphy and you're sitting around and you want an opportunity to go play somewhere and you still want the best opportunity, right? You could already be dealing with a bunch of teams with full dance cards.
Right.
How many teams have we already seen fill their quarterback needs? We talked about Riley Leonard coming from Duke to Notre Dame, Tyler Van Dyke transferring from Miami to Wisconsin. You look around and all of a sudden the game of musical chairs starts to stop. And if you're Malik Murphy, even if you had this window extended past, well, it could already be full, and you could all of a sudden be looking out at a transfer portal with much less appetizing options and ones that could ultimately harm your football future if you're not going to the right opportunity in a place that might help you maximize your skills. And so it's going to take a lot of collaborative thinking on this. And, Dad, you always point this out when it comes to NFL collective bargaining issues of you also have to be careful to not let what's going to happen and affect a few affect policy for the vast majority if it does work for the bulk of college football players. And so while I feel for Malik Murphy, and I don't want this to have to be a thing where a guy has to choose between wearing a ring with a team that he's given blood, sweat, and tears to for an entire season and his football future, but I also understand that this is a system that right now we're still learning a lot about, and I don't want to change the rules in a way that's going to subvert other guys being able to get to where they want to go at the time they need to get there.
It's a great point that you bring up about the CBA and the union defending players. The union's job is to defend the majority, all the players, but if defending the few hurts the majority, that's not the way to go. So that's a very good point on your part, which furthers me saying I don't know the answer to this. It would seem the easy thing would be to move the date, but what else does that affect? So I don't know the answer other than, you know what, maybe this is, there are no perfect scenarios, right? Somebody's always going to catch the low end of it, and maybe this is one of those situations.
And that's how it's been for college football on a lot of fronts, right? The extra COVID year ends up impacting players coming out of high school. The transfer portal does something similar there. Maybe the end result is you push all of this back postseason, so you've got players that can finish out and play through bowl games and then make the decision once they're totally done with the season. But then there's how does that line up with the academic calendar, the offseason programs for teams? It's going to take a lot of these people that claim to care an awful lot about the student athlete, in quotes, in the middle of all this, actually coming together and trying to think about something in terms of what does best benefit the athlete in question that's looking to make an incredibly important decision for their future.
Back here on GoJo and Golic. So after 3 months in which nobody really emerged as the frontrunner in the NFL MVP race, two men have now seemingly taken control. Dak Prescott, and then on the other side, you see on your screen, Brock Purdy. So Prescott, now the betting favorite on the DraftKings Sportsbook after leading Dallas to a Sunday night win over the Eagles. And the guys sitting down recently with ESPN's Mina to discuss Dak's MVP candidacy and other quarterback storylines. It's meaty. Listen to this.
All right, very excited to welcome in longtime friend of the show, Mina Kimes, ESPN NFL analyst, co-host of the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the best NFL podcast out there, wherever you get them. Mina, how you doing, bud?
Hi, you were just a guest on the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, so I can say this week it was the best NFL podcast out there.
And I know everybody, talking about your baby, congrats with all that and the whole deal, but sometimes then gets lost. How's Lenny?
Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Lenny is thriving. He doesn't get as much attention like on Gross, but when he does get attention, it's often just one of us. So whoever is with him is very dialed in. So I think he's doing okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Good for him.
There we go. Lenny having to balance his multiple roles as both podcast co-host and now big brother is a lot on his plate. And thankfully, Lenny is able to handle all of that. He's an incredible, incredible man. And we are lucky to have his mom here with us now. So, Mina, as we talked, you mentioned I was on your podcast. There's a bunch of stuff that we talked about on your show that I think would be really interesting to follow up on this week. And one of those things has been the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, who's playing MVP caliber football right now. It's been incredible to watch, but I know on live you mentioned Mike McCarthy, and I think it's been really interesting to see how his play calling seems to have changed this year. Have you noticed a different Mike McCarthy in terms of how he's kind of operated with this Cowboys offense?
Yeah, Big Mike really has, I wouldn't say prove the haters wrong because it's December. And I think we probably, anytime you praise Mike McCarthy, you get a million, do it in the playoffs. And you know what? It's justified with him. I get it. I think especially given how good this roster is. But just going off of what we've seen so far this year, I've been impressed by both the play calling, which of course he took over, which I was dubious of. I mean, and I think we were right to be dubious of it. The end of his tenure in Green Bay, things felt pretty stale with that offense and Aaron Rodgers. And the Cowboys offense with Kellen Moore was was very efficient and creative, and the numbers bore that out. But he has, I think, dramatically surpassed my expectations. And I think what's been so cool about this offense is not just the way he's clearly set up Dak to have such a fantastic season, an MVP caliber season, but also the way that the offense has evolved as the year has gone on, the way that they've used CeeDee Lamb, changing, about a third of the way through the NFL season, moving him around, the use of motion to, create advantages both in the pass game and the run game, get information for Dak, who's like a supercomputer as it is. He's done a lot of things well there. And then from a game management standpoint, I was thinking about this watching the Eagles beat down. At the end of the half, when he was calling those timeouts to set up his offense to score, I was thinking, man, this is the kind of thing if Mike McCarthy didn't do, he would get clowned for. So we should praise him for doing a good job managing this game. He's going for a fourth down in the right moments. He's added more EPA per play than all but 3 coaches in the NFL in those situations. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for the Cowboys' success this year.
I'll tell you, while I was calling that game for Westwood One Minute, and I was praising him because that was a great moment at 17-3. The Eagles could have made it 17-10, and Philadelphia was getting the ball. So it could have been that old twofer for him. They held him to a field goal while McCarthy used his timeout. So now it's 17-6, and then they go down and score and make it 24-6. And I agree with you in watching film on them and then calling the game. McCarthy is mixing it up much more, moving around CeeDee Lamb. He was the only wide receiver going into this weekend that had over 500 yards in the slot and out at wide receiver. But I like the play calling. And the biggest difference for Dak, obviously, is the turnover. So sticking more on Dak, it doesn't seem like he's trying to drill it through people anymore, which turns into turnovers. And I do think the play call is helping him a lot. He seems to be as comfortable as he's ever been out there.
Yeah, and I will say, he still does love him a tight window seam throw. And I love that he's still doing it. I was actually worried, Mike, that after last season, he might be reticent. I agree with you. There's certain balls he's not forcing, especially in that kind of 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 yard range in the middle of the field. There were some balls last year we were like, what are you doing? Don't do that. Don't throw that. But the fact that he's still been fairly aggressive throwing downfield, especially in between the numbers, I'm happy to see. I also think, though, the fact that there's fewer turnovers and that they've been so successful has to do with the personnel. The ball to Cooks, the post, which I tweet this. Nobody throws that ball better than Dak Prescott this year. Nobody, like truly. To Brandon Cooks, I was thinking about last year and I was like, who catches that ball last year? Who was there? Like Gallup was still coming off of the injury. It felt like defenses could just key in on Lamb and nobody else was getting separation. So, there weren't those options for Prescott. Ferguson, I think, has really emerged as a really decent tight end. So yeah, he's having an amazing season. I think an MVP caliber season thus far. And it feels like everything's clicking for that offense. Like they seem to be just in complete control of every game right now.
So from the team on top, or one of the teams on top of the NFC right now, sticking in that conference, watching the Detroit Lions back from this weekend, Mina, we've talked a lot about them and the Jags on this show as teams were kind of unsure where they've fit in terms of ceiling in the NFL. And I was struck by Jared Goff this last weekend and how shaky he looked in certain moments. Are we getting to the point where the Lions are going to start to have some like long-term existential concerns about what their team can be with him?
What do you think Jared Goff's QBR is when he's pressured? If you had to guess.
I mean, it's got to be, bottom quarter of the league.
It's 1.3, which is the worst in the NFL right now.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, and Dak is 75, to put that in perspective. He's the best in the league.
Yeah.
So Jared Goff's always struggled when pressured. That's who he is as a quarterback. It's just we've seen a lot of him play a lot of football. But yeah, and I said this a lot coming into this season. I wasn't that worried because I thought the Lions' offensive line and their scheme, because of what they were able to do on early downs with the run, the pass, and was so good. But watching them last week, like this offensive line, they've had some injuries, but they've struggled a bit. And especially when he's in passing downs, you've really seen, when the circumstances aren't great, when guys aren't getting separation outside, they don't really attack outside the numbers. And when he's not like incredibly well protected, you're getting bad Goff, you're getting the bad decisions, you're getting the inaccuracies. And I do think it raises questions not just about this year and whether they're a contender, but beyond. I mean, there was a point, I think, at the beginning of the season where it seemed like a foregone conclusion they'd give him an extension. I don't think that's the case anymore. If I was a Lions fan, I would not advocate for that.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that would happen either. Completely agree with you. And they play the Broncos on Saturday, who is a hot team right now. And our good buddy, all of ours, Jason Fitz and I, were talking about the AFC. And our thought was Pittsburgh is going to be out and it's going to be replaced by either Buffalo or Denver. So it was deciding which team, if only one of those teams, Mina, was going to get in because we think Pittsburgh will be out, who would end up getting in.
I don't have their schedules in front of me. I think the Bills have a harder schedule, right? I mean, I know that, yeah. So it might be the Broncos just because of the competition. I think the Broncos face Easton Stick again.
The Broncos play the Lions, the Patriots, the Chargers, and then the Raiders. So yeah, those
are all winnable games.
Yep, they definitely are.
Which the Bills are a better team, I think. They have obviously better quarterback. But I also think the Broncos deserve a ton of credit for their turnaround. I did a sort of breakdown on my YouTube channel. Check it out, youtube.com/@MinaKimes, about how the Broncos turned it around. And when I was sort of digging into the numbers and watching them a bit more when their win streak began, I was struck by how a lot of it was actually just because of personnel, guys who weren't starting those first few weeks. It feels like Vance Joseph really, it took some time to figure out the right players for their defense. They shed some, Randy Gregory gone, Frank Clark gone, a couple cornerbacks changing. Pass rush has really turned up, and coupled with turnovers and then fairly conservative, consistent play from Russell Wilson, they're playing good complementary football. It's not the sexiest football, aside from like the occasional splash play to Cortland Sutton, but they're winning games. And I think Sean Payton deserves a lot of credit for holding that together.
So quickly with the comparison, the Bills play the Cowboys, and then they play Easton Stick as well, and then they play Bailey Zappi as well before they finish up with the Dolphins. So not after what we saw with the Dolphins, couldn't burn 2 minutes off the clock to win a game. I mean.
It is interesting, though, as we talk about the rest of the AFC picture a little bit right now, and we come off a weekend where the Kansas City Chiefs lose that game to the Buffalo Bills, the Dolphins, a bunch more injuries compounding their loss on Monday Night Football. Mina, does this have to be the year for the Baltimore Ravens? Like, based on what we've seen from them, how big is the gap between them and the rest of the conference right now?
I wouldn't say it's that big, because I think that you saw against the Rams, they're not a perfect. They're flawed. I mean, the offense, Mike. I think we were watching this game and talking at the same time. Like, the offense they're inconsistent still. The ceiling is really high, and you still have like the potential for Lamar to have these like otherworldly moments, which he did in that game. But the offense is still a work in progress without Mark Andrews, I think. And then defensively, they actually, they struggled a little bit against what is admittedly a very good Rams offense and very underrated and probably not talked about enough. But to your point, when you look around the AFC, they do look like the most complete football team to me in the AFC, which makes the Christmas matchup with San Francisco all the more delicious, because it really feels like the best team in the AFC and the NFC right now meeting.
Yeah, I'd say a potential Super Bowl preview coming up here on Christmas, which God's gift for the NFL as they continue to try and stamp out the NBA on Christmas Day in the lineup that they've got there. Mina, we can sit here and talk to you all day. Thank you so much for the time, bud. Everyone check out Mina on NFL Live, the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, that you can also watch, as she mentioned, on YouTube as well. A bunch of great original content there. Thanks, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
All right, from Mina's quarterback analysis to Cam Newton. So buckle up here, baby, because Newton is not impressed with several starting quarterbacks here, guys, two of which are at the top of the league MVP race, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott. And he initially weighed in on the 49ers signal caller here before offering his 2 cents on a few other guys.
But Brock, they're not winning because of him.
He's not turning the ball over.
He's managing the game. And if we were to put that in its own right as game managers, this may ruffle a lot of feathers, but it's honest. Brock, Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, and really, Dak Prescott. These are game managers. They're not difference makers.
All right, there's a lot to take away from that clip, including his outfit. But the job of quarterback here, guys, first and foremost, it's to help his team win football games. And if that leads to being labeled as a game manager, so be it. So, GoJo, which one of those guys he just mentioned should be the most offended?
Well, first off, I do want to reference the outfit that you were talking about there with Cam Newton.
It's tough.
He was wearing the exact same sweater that I also bought from Spencer's in the lead up to a holiday Christmas party. So I want to give a shout out to him for having elite taste in fashion and doing it at a more affordable price there. That is for those people who might be interested in emulating and being influenced by myself and Cam Newton, two fashion icons there. That is the Christmas Story leg lamp sweater that you can get at a Spencer's store near you. Not an ad for Spencer's, but hey, listen, if they want to come in, who knows?
That kind of reminds me when I was out in LA for Major League Baseball All-Star Game festivities, I had posted a pic of Verlander and Kate Upton on like the red carpet out there. My wife saw the story and she immediately, and she's like a professional investigator online, she immediately goes on and finds out Kate Upton's wearing these $15 sunglasses from like Walmart. And my wife's like, this is incredible. I can look like Kate Upton for $15.
Emerson, I'm telling you, I mean, my wife and my daughter, same thing. To be able to see something and find it within seconds is stunning. Dude. And I'll start with Cam, too. Cam can wear anything and look good in it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
The dude is just model-esque.
Yeah, he's got swag.
I don't agree with what he said, but it's fine. He can have his opinion, but he can put on basically anything and look good in it. I wish I was in that position because that's where he is from a look standpoint.
There's something about our ladies.
Well, it's like the confidence that he walks into all that with too. Like he just any given situation, he is going to walk in and he wears it with. Like I said, that's a $50 sweater from Spencer's that he walked in there and decided, no, this is going to be the thing that I light the internet up in today. Because Dad, he did hit the hot button issue for so many people when it comes to the discussion of their quarterbacks, and it's this notion of game manager, this label that he throws on there, which I think is funny because for anyone that got mad about this, and boy, some people use this as an opportunity to, I think, just get off their feelings on Cam that they had been holding up for over the years.
He's polarizing, dude.
And try
people
and
love to hate on him.
Well, it's because Cam's a big personality at a position that usually has not rewarded that, and especially at the time that he played in the league, he was sort of on the cusp of that. And so I do think it's funny, like the general premise of this is Cam Newton, who is one of the most exciting, incredible individual talents at the quarterback position we have ever seen, and played this position a very specific way, affected games a very specific way. You could run quarterback power over and over again in a game with a guy who's basically the size of a large deer in your backfield. He was the Josh Allen build with an even better rushing ability than Josh Allen, and you could use it on a down-in, down-out basis. So if you're telling me, Dad, the general premise is incredibly great former player looks at quarterbacks who don't play the game the way he did as lesser than he was, I'm not overly surprised by that. Like Cam Newton, when he named the quarterbacks that he saw as game changers, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, guys like that, he looked at quarterbacks that could affect the game the same way that he could in a lot of ways. Now, Mahomes, very different quarterback than him, but if you're denying Mahomes' greatness, you're invalidating your credentials as someone analyzing quarterbacks. But for the rest of it, I'm not surprised that he looks at quarterbacks that can't do the things that he did and sees them as lesser than there. That's like the most human reaction possible, especially from a former player.
It is amazing how game manager has been deemed a swear word. That you're not a better quarterback if you're a game manager. The thing with Dak and Brock Purdy and who I know Goff. Who else? Oh, Tua.
Jared Goff.
And Tua. But with Tua, Purdy, and Dak, game managers, this is the only system they've been in. It's the only team they've been on. I mean, they don't know another system. While Tua had a coaching change from Brian Flores to Mike McDaniel, Brock Purdy has had the same coach. Dak has had the same coach, different old coordinator, but same coach, same type of offense. So, I mean, this is all these guys have had to deal with, and they're doing it well. And then to label them as game managers, I don't get it. They're doing what they need to do for their team to win.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, they're putting up some pretty impressive numbers while doing it. So to just label it, and Cam is using game manager as a negative toward these guys. Make no mistake, that's what he's doing. I don't understand that thought process. I really don't.
So, GoJo, question for you. How difficult is it to measure the value of a quarterback in today's NFL? Because seemingly every guy is capable of putting up big numbers, right? But then minus Patrick Mahomes, who you brought up earlier, like one could find something really negative to say almost about every starting NFL quarterback, whether it's like lack of stats, mounting injuries, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I like statistical analysis is only going to go so far, and it's ultimately what you see out there, like guys that are capable of making throws that few other people can. Ultimately, some of this defaults back to physical ability, right? Like Matthew Stafford's a perfect example. He's an imperfect quarterback when you look at some of the things over the years in terms of metrics, but some of the things that he can do, like he's doing again right now, a quarterback, there just aren't a lot of guys around the league that can do. Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa didn't walk out of the hospital with enough to do the things that on his best day Matthew Stafford's capable of. And I think that's ultimately what this boils down to is these guys are going out and executing at a high level, but to a certain point, you look and go, all right, when asked to elevate beyond the limits of the people around them there, are these guys capable of doing that? Not sometimes, because we've seen Brock Purdy has cut a bunch of throws loose, but how often are they asked to and how much are they capable of transcending that on a regular basis? And we've seen guys like Mahomes, guys like Josh Allen, guys like Lamar Jackson do that over and over again, find a way to make the plays that other people couldn't inside and outside of the offense. And with a lot of these other guys, we either haven't seen it consistently enough yet or over a long enough time to lump them into the same category. And I don't think that's a bad thing to say.
right, so the Minister of Defense is the next installment of ESPN's 30 for 30 series. It debuted last night, and it highlights the life here of NFL legend Reggie White. So it features never-before-seen footage from a 2004 interview with White just 2 months before he passed away, plus interviews with many of his former teammates, including our very own Mike Golic Sr., who played alongside White for 6 seasons. So, Senior, I'll ask you this. Where does your old friend rank among best defensive players in NFL history?
Oh, I have put him at number one. I think it's between him and Lawrence Taylor. And again, anybody who wants to say Lawrence Taylor, I'm not going to sit here and have this massive argument with Lawrence Taylor was an absolute beast. But what I saw Reggie do up and down the line, whether it was against a tackle, a guard, either guard or a center. As I said earlier, or the other day, I've talked about Lamar Jackson in a sport full of the greatest athletes, some of the greatest athletes in the world. Lamar is different, right? I mean, he just looks different. And that's what you could say about Reggie. Reggie took players who were some of the great players and literally threw them. I mean, with his rip and that hump move that he used, and what he did with his leverage and his strength it's laughable when you watch it. When you watch the string of highlights of him just hoisting people, the most amazing one, Larry Allen, one of the great old linemen of all time, who for a time played right tackle, played just about every position on the line except center. And Reggie hoisted him one time. And it's an incredible leverage move. But he would do he was 6'6", 315. I watched him run a 4.6 40. He benched, he squatted, and he cleaned. Those were his lifts. He was strong. How I was weak, but I made up for it by being slow. He was strong in the weight room, had great leverage, was fast, and was quick. I mean, he had all the tools. But as the doc showed, he was a complicated person. On the football field, there was no complications. He was literally, in my eyes, the greatest defensive player ever. But just for sake of argument, certainly right up there as one of the top guys of all time. But he was a guy, and like anything else, you sit for one of these, and I'm there for 2 hours, and they use a few lines. When it got into the religious side of Reggie and the things he said, against homosexuals and other things that led from his religion. Reggie was a very cut and dry religious person. If it said it in the Bible, that's what he felt the way it should go. He and and the thing about Reggie that I love, that I've always said this, he was a minister at 17 years old. He never pushed in the locker room. He never preached in the locker room. But if you wanted to have a discussion, he would. And he and I were really, really good friends, and we would have discussions. And I certainly disagreed with him on some of his thought processes of basically, I would say, you can't put everybody in one box here, because it says it in this book that it's law. I said, it's what people's beliefs are. I respect your beliefs, and I would hope you would respect my beliefs. And it was interesting, Mike, at the end of this, and this is, I didn't unfortunately see him right before he passed, because you don't think that's going to happen, because we had stayed in touch. But the transformation that he was making, for those that will watch this or did watch it, was really something else, as far as he felt he did almost misled people when he was preaching and took them down the wrong road when he was preaching. Kind of what we had talked about of, because it said it here, it must have been the way it should be done. And he started to question that a little bit and was searching for more answers. And unfortunately, his life was cut so short as he was starting on that journey. So that was an interesting, I think, note for people to see out of him, as we all knew him through his football career. I'll tell you what, LZ Granderson was probably the best on there. There were a lot of people talking. There was obviously, in a situation like this, you interview a lot of people. I thought he was fantastic. His wife, Sarah, who obviously I've known for years. Jeremy, I mean, my God, we were all in Philly when he was, a baby, when all those pictures were going on, when the video of Reggie playing with him and his sister, I mean, it brought back a lot of tough, sad memories. But he was one of the football. There was no issue off the field. He was very, very sure of what he was saying at the time, and it got him, it seemed, into some hot water over that.
Yeah, it was so interesting watching this documentary because, Dad, growing up, and I've said this to people before, Reggie was like Paul Bunyan in our house. Like, I used to listen. My favorite stories that you've told on air over the years are almost all Reggie White stories. Like, the guy, as far as feats of strength, as far as, his dedication to religion, all these things, he was like a folk hero for us growing up. And so many times when we present people that have passed, we tend to flatten the characters a lot because there's that idea of you speak no ill of the dead. And I thought this documentary did a really good job of presenting the full, very complicated view. And you were right about LZ as someone who is a black man who's a member of the LGBTQ plus community who got to speak to both sides of you see all the good that one person can do, but also all the harm that they can cause to this other group of people while they think they're out here working in the name of good for the cause that's nearest and dearest to them. That inherent conflict at times and what that can do. I thought he spoke to that beautifully. And you're right. For people that weren't aware, Reggie at the end of his life had gone back and decided that he wanted to read the Bible in its original language. He went and learned Hebrew. He went to Israel. He got a hold of the text, and he wanted to see it for himself, not just the version that he had presented to him by other people. And I thought at the end of his life, that introspection that he displayed in that interview footage, which was incredibly compelling, that level of introspection, a guy who looked back and for so long was so certain that the world was one way because of what he had been told, and had the humility at that point to realize and look back and say, maybe I was wrong about all these things, but not only that, my God, what I used my platform for all those years that I thought was just might not be so. It was, the world was robbed in so many ways for losing Reggie when they did, but what he could have done with it seemed like the knowledge he was acquiring at that point seemed to be limitless.
It was really interesting during that last interview, the person doing the interview, because Reggie, I mean, truly, the one thing about Reggie, he is genuine. I mean, what you see is what you get with Reggie. Even agree or disagree, he is very, very genuine in his thoughts. And he seemed so remorseful and bummed that he felt he led people the wrong way with his preaching, and the interviewer for that last interview was trying to say, Reggie, understand though, you did a lot of good. Do you understand that you helped a lot of people? You did a lot of good. And even with that, Reggie said, I understand that, but I still feel I misled them. And he was dedicating his life at that point to, in his eyes, fixing that. He felt he did that wrong, and it seemed like from that point going forward, he was going to try and right that ship in his mind of learning. And I think one of the big things is just what you said, Mike. In an era now where you get in Twitter battles and nobody changes their mind and everybody justifies their reason and never takes culpability, he did in the biggest way. As religion was way bigger part of his life than football. And he actually said, the biggest part of my life, basically the part that interested me the most or meant the most to me, I did wrong. I did wrong, and I want to right that. So he was very aware of, he did not like the way he was taught and the fact that he taught that way and was trying to change it. You don't get that a lot in people of that high profile to say, you know what, maybe this was wrong. Maybe I wasn't right in some of the things I said. And man, the people I may have affected with my words, gosh, this is not good. I need to right that ship. And that's what he was in the midst of doing before, unfortunately, he lost his life at 43.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, if you've got some time, it's among the 30 for 30s, among the best I've ever seen. Obviously had a selfish interest in it, knowing everything I had heard through you about Reggie, seeing your perspective on that, but just a very complete view and a complicated viewing. There's people always talk about, the meme of what happens when the worst guy makes a good point. This is what happens when one of the best people someone you love, says things that you find disagreeable, says things that you find in moral opposition, and how you grapple with that, and how he ended up grappling with that, all while being one of the most important football players of my lifetime or any lifetime. All right, welcome back. With so much going on in the National Basketball Association right now, we need to bring in some reinforcements. The league is having a little bit of a moment right now. And so for more on that, we're excited to talk to our friend Tom Haberstroh, Trailblazers Analytics Insider. You can check him out, The Finder, over on Substack as well. But Tom, what's it been like digesting the last 24 to 48 hours of NBA basketball as the in-season tournament passion has apparently spilled back over into the rest of the regular season?
I can't get enough of this game ball gate. I think Tom Ziller over at Substack called it game ball Ghazi. The idea that there is a scandal erupting in the NBA involving Giannis Antetokounmpo after a 64-point game, and he's going into the tunnel to fight, to try to rectify a situation involving a game ball. We don't even know if he got the game ball. There is now a backup game ball, which I think there's a bootleg game ball. And oh, by the way, guys, Draymond Green got suspended indefinitely. And it's just, it becomes a back page story now. It's a mere footnote because this Giannis story is just so explosive.
So we definitely want to get to Draymond, but when we talked about this earlier, we wanted you to power rank the three situations and who should get the game ball in the power ranking. So there's Oscar Tshiebwe, who scored his first points in the NBA, and it was literally his first point. He scored 1 point, but it was the first in the NBA. So that he got his first point. Then you have Giannis, who set the franchise record with 64 points, beating Michael Redd's 57 back in 06. And you have Dame Lillard's. He is now fifth all-time on most three-pointers made all time. So you have those three situations. Who, if you had the game ball in your hand, Tom, who would you hand it to say you deserve this the most?
All right, well, it's definitely not Oscar Tshiebwe, and I'll tell you why, okay? Oscar Tshiebwe scored 1 point 5 days ago in the in-season tournament final. You said it, Mike, that it was his first NBA point. But the NBA had the in-season tournament final 5 days ago, and he scored. He scored, and I am here to tell you that it's been erased from history because Adam Silver decided that no stats are official from the IST final.
Wow.
If it happened in the semifinals, it would have counted. But because that was the 83rd game in the schedule for the Indiana Pacers and the Lakers, they decided it doesn't count as a real game. But Oscar Tshiebwe, I promise you, you can look back on the tape. He entered the game with 70 seconds left in a 15-point game, okay? He got fouled on an offensive rebound. He went to the free throw line. He missed the first one, and then the ball went up in the air and through the basket, and we are supposed to believe that didn't count? So he had his official NBA point on Saturday, but it doesn't count. And so this game last night, when he gets his first point, I'll put it in quotation marks, it wasn't his first point. It just was this weird loophole that only accounting firms can understand, that this game didn't count the other day. Oscar Tshiebwe already had an NBA point, so I'm throwing him out. Giannis Antetokounmpo gets the game ball. He should get the game ball. But it is amazing to me that, Rick Carlisle went on to the press conference afterwards and was like, this is unfortunate. It was a big misunderstanding. And then kind of teases this little thing that like coaches sometimes do. And they're like, one of our players, one of their players happened to elbow our GM, and I think he's got bruised ribs. It might even be something more than that, but I don't know. It might have broken a rib. I just don't know. This is just really unfortunate, guys. Oscar Tshiebwe doesn't get the game ball. In sum, he had his first NBA point on Saturday. I don't care what the whole loophole language is.
So basically what you're saying is this entire, as I believe Rick Carlisle called it, fracas, was the fault of Adam Silver for the way that he structured the in-season tournament.
That's what I'm saying here, is this would not have happened. None of this would have happened if we just recognized the in-season tournament finale, in which we created, there was confetti. There might have been a parade in Vegas. I'm not sure. LeBron James is carrying this trophy above his head, and there's tears everywhere. Everyone's crying. There's all sorts of pomp and circumstance around the game. But Oscar Tshiebwe, his point did not count, and we are sitting here talking about it because it was erased from history. Thanks, Adam.
Tom, I'll say you have changed my mind. We rated this before, and we said we'd have given Tshiebwe the ball. We thought it was his first point, but you correctly told us it wasn't, so the ball should definitely go to Giannis. Completely agree there. So we talk about the emotion after the in-season championship game, which, by the way, was the most watched non-Christmas game during the regular season on any network in 6 years, so kudos to them for that. Speaking of emotion, what emotion should we be feeling in Golden State about Draymond Green for his sixth suspension all time and this one indefinite? So the league doesn't even know when the hell they're going to let him come back.
Yeah, I just did this story last night. And by the way, I was writing this story on TomTheFinder.com, and I just kind of turned off everything so that I could focus on writing out 15 different Draymond Green incidents and whether he has a thing against foreigners, because Swaggy P, Nick Young, went on Undisputed with Skip Bayless and said that, hey, have you noticed that he seems to be doing this? Domantas Sabonis, Yusuf Nurkic, Steven Adams. There seems to be a trend here. So I went and looked at this, Mike. I went and looked and basically investigated the claim that Draymond Green has a thing against foreigners and basically whether he's a xenophobe. And what I found was, no, he does not. His antics do not discriminate. He goes after LeBron James. You remember that? He went after Kevin Durant and got suspended by the team. He went after James Harden a couple times. He's gone after Jordan Poole, punched him in the face. And this is what I want to talk about here. He punched his teammate and pretty much knocked him out, haymaker to the jaw, and no one suspended him. The league didn't suspend him. The team didn't suspend him. And so we're sitting here just in the same way that Adam Silver didn't credit Oscar Tshiebwe with his first career point in an IST championship game. If we actually held him accountable back with the Jordan Poole thing, I don't think we're sitting here talking about an indefinite suspension. The Warriors didn't hold him accountable. The NBA didn't hold him accountable. And we could have seen this coming. So indefinite suspension, the NBA did this with Ja Morant. I think at the end of the day, they have to drop the hammer here. They have to hold him accountable because they certainly didn't do it last year. And we thought it was Jordan Poole's problem. It is a Draymond Green problem.
I mean, just incredible research here. Tom Haberstroh completely changing hearts and minds on this show, getting us to the real issues here. Tom, we got about a minute and a half left here, and in that, I want to turn to another thing that you've looked at here, because this all does tie back to what we've seen is a rash of ejections around the NBA, some deserved like this, others like the Nikola Jokic ejection on Serbian Heritage Night in Chicago, less so here. What pattern have you found in the ejections league-wide?
Yeah, I did the research on that too because I kind of felt like the ejections were way up. And I think you mentioned this, GoJo, the idea that like it feels like ejections are way up. And they are. Ejections are on pace to have a season high over the last decade in the NBA. So we're on pace for 80 ejections. And the thing I want to point out here, really interesting trend, the guys who are getting tossed, the star players that are getting tossed by referees who are very inexperienced, non-playoff officials. And I think that's part of the reason why they're getting so frustrated here is because they don't know who these referees are. The NBA decides who are the 36 best officials in the league. And the guys who are getting, with the early trigger on ejecting these stars, they're not those playoff officials. So I think that's part of this story that we need to focus on. And I did a whole bunch of research on this. You can find it on TomTheFinder.com. And the Oscar Tshiebwe thing, I haven't done an investigation yet, but I will soon. So stay tuned.
If you needed any more reason, go check it out. He mentioned it, TomTheFinder.com. The man is doing all of the necessary work to get to the bottom of the NBA mysteries right now, the most emotional league in pro sports at this particular juncture, and Tom is finding a way to cut through. Tom, we appreciate all the time, buddy. This was awesome. We'll have to do it again soon.
Anytime. TomTheFinder.com. Let's go.
Mike, the thing I love about this the most is it's like someone doing my work for me, right? It's like I just got to go check out all his research and info, and I'm good.
I mean, the stuff about the new officials in terms of this is fascinating and a both great information, but also an incredible human element to what we're seeing right now all across the NBA, and something great for everyone to keep in mind going forward. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. And if you can't check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, our DraftKings YouTube channel, which you should go and subscribe to. Smash the subscribe button, like a bunch of our videos. You can also check us out here and get us wherever you get your podcast. Catch up on our great guests like Mina, ESPN NFL analyst today, who was kind enough to join us to talk Dak Prescott MVP race, Mike McCarthy, and more. And our buddy Tom Haberstroh over at TomTheFinder.com, who changed a lot of our minds on a bunch of the things going on around the NBA, not the least of which was the game ball gate after the Bucks and Pacers game. So check all that out wherever you get your podcast. Let's get to, Dad, this, that, and the third. And start off with this. We talked about your Eagles days with the Reggie White documentary today. I want to tap into Houston Oilers Mike Golic, the original Mike Golic version in the NFL, as we got the announcement that the Tennessee Titans plan to wear their Houston Oilers throwbacks this weekend when they host the Houston Texans. Dad, does this seem wrong to you? Because this seems both calculated and cruel.
Oh, hell yeah, it's calculated. I love it because people naturally assume the Houston Oilers are now the Houston Texans, but they are not. For those, again, that may not know, the Houston Oilers became the Tennessee Titans, and they will be wearing the uniforms that I wore back when I came into the league in '85 when I had the excellent D-line number of number 68, Mike, and you've gone over numbers and knows what a horrible number that is for a defensive lineman. But when you're a 10th round pick, you take whatever jersey they throw your way and say, thank you, sir, may I have another? But I think it's awesome. I love the uniforms. So I got to see that already. I got to see the Philly throwbacks to when I was there as well. But doing it in Houston is just, without question, something wonderfully, wonderfully planned.
Well, and to your point here, like, it feels like cruel because they left and took the jerseys with them. Like, you shouldn't, in theory, in a lot of people's minds, have to leave the jerseys back at the border once you're going out of the state of Texas. I agree. I love it just because we get to see him again. Like, I don't harbor any of those feelings. I just like seeing these. What I've realized now, Dad, is I would argue you wore, for real, the 2 greatest NFL jerseys of all time. Like, I think the Houston Oilers powder blues and the Eagles Kelly greens are the 2 best NFL uniforms in league history. So congrats to you.
They were very cool. Loved the Derek on the helmet as well. Thought it was great. I agree. I mean, when I went back to I called the Philly game when they wore the throwbacks, it was so cool. Just being down on the sideline and looking at those numbers and seeing Jordan Davis wearing my own number and him looking way better than I ever did, if they're the incredible athlete that he is. It was just very cool. And then the same thing with Houston. So it's kind of fun to see. I'm one of those, I love the different uniforms. Like, I love every Oregon has so many different variations and people love them or rip them. I'm just a fan when you change things up. For you guys at Notre Dame, the Shamrock Series, you would have different Notre Dame uniforms that the guys would get to keep. I just think that stuff's fantastic when you do. So I'm all for these kind of things.
This gives me PTSD
I think the
from
Eagles should just go
Steve McNair.
Yeah.
Steve McNair went back in the AFC Central days with the Jaguars, just being a thorn in Jacksonville's side. So,
always comes back to Duval County, doesn't it?
It really does, because we're
because
we're America's team, Golic Senior, whether you like it or not. Okay, bud? Relax,
turn his
bucko.
mic off somehow, some way.
Whoa!
America's team needs a little bit more of that Captain America super serum as of late because they haven't looked quite like America's team, especially on the rush defense side. But
right.
Emerson, let's get to that in this story here. We've also talked a lot about college sports today and the changes in the calendar, the different challenges that it faces here. No challenges for the athletes over at Utah right now who are getting some of the good side of all this.
Dude, 2 months after the University of Utah's Crimson Collective surprised all 85 scholarship football players with custom pickup trucks, a moment that took the NIL world by storm, raising questions about Title IX and collective support. The Crimson Collective has now expanded their car gifting to include both Ute men's basketball team, so the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team, and the women's gymnastics athletes as well. Junior, you played football at the wrong time. We all did. I still have 4 years of eligibility left. I would join University of Utah for this.
It's a great perk. My only regret about this situation, and Dad, you can appreciate this as someone who saw both in college, but then certainly as you get ready and start the NFL draft preparation process, and you see guys that start to get the money from their agents, and what starts to show up in the parking lots at that point. It used to be the international symbol for I am either a college player getting some money under the table, or I am an NFL player who has now found money that previously I didn't have. Used to be the Dodge Chargers and Challengers. And once they got discontinued, we lost the premier car of young athletes everywhere, and I feel sad that these kids aren't going to get to experience that kind of muscle under the hood, even though they are getting cars right now for free, which is freaking sick.
Yeah, I'm not feeling sad for them one bit because they're all getting cars. I mean, that is amazing. And again, how they're doing this, they're leasing it to the scholarship athletes. If they were to go in the portal and leave, they would lose the car. And once their eligibility is up, they'd lose the car as well. There are ancillary questions, though. Do they have to pay for insurance?
There's no way. You can't gift somebody a vehicle and then be like, you got to pay for this, that, and the other.
I would agree, right? You can't. And plus, they should all get some kind of a gas card as well to at least start them off. Yes. Give them a full tank and then give them a gas card. Help them out here a little bit. And I'm sitting here complaining like a car isn't enough. I'm worried about these other things. Well, but the insurance is an important thing.
Yes, it is. But all right, so I lived in Salt Lake City for 3 years with my wife. I will say car insurance is cheap as hell out there. It costs me $50 a month for car insurance. Full coverage. You could smash me on either side. Fender bender, whatever, dude. $50 a month. It was very, very affordable.
Treat Emerson like a bumper car because that insurance is hitting out in Utah, boy. Well, congratulations to everybody there. Love see, you know what? This is the stuff we've been waiting around. Yeah. Everyone talks about and tries to boogeyman the NIL stuff and the No. This is the good stuff. This is what I came to see. All the rest of it, can be complicated. Let's get college kids cool stuff because we can and they should. Speaking of college, let's get to the third. Emerson, I was enthralled last night as across my television screen on ESPNU, the Microsoft Excel Collegiate Challenge all of a sudden took center stage.
I was today years old when I realized that this was actually a thing. And then, my research 5 minutes ago, I realized it was on television. So the event brought together over 50 students coming from 11 countries and representing 29 universities here. The students showing off their amazing skills by solving a variety of Excel-based cases, from locating baseball pitches within a strike zone to determining the delivery order along a neighborhood newspaper route. I would fail this immediately.
Well, so I need, by the way...
Say your favorite Excel function before you proceed further with your talk. And I said, okay, I'm going to say it as VLOOKUP. And he said to me back, that shows your age.
All right, so that's the dean of Eller College.
I was beside myself. Oh, my guy Carthage, the dean of Eller College of Management in Arizona, dropping the Excel jokes and had the crowd eating out of the palm of his hand. Dad, watching this was an electric factory, and it's a reminder of the importance of a broadcast booth in sports that people are not aware of, because the broadcast crew for this one had energy. They were enthralled by what was going on. They sold the hell out of it. I had no idea what I was watching, as these kids did more with Excel than I'll be able to do with any platform in my entire life. But I couldn't get enough of this.
They competed for $30,000 in prize money. Congrats, University of Arizona team. They won the event. Okay, Mike, what the hell is this? I don't understand
I don't get it.
I locating pitches, neighborhood, the route for food delivery. I don't know what they were doing to win the competition. I don't understand this competition at all. Explain it to me somehow, some way, in a way I can understand it.
I can't even navigate the schedule they send out here with an Excel spreadsheet.
No. Dad, the whole point of this is I can't explain it to you. I still have no greater knowledge of Excel from watching this, and yet I couldn't look away. And that, folks, is how you know that they have made a quality entertainment product. So congratulations to the University of Arizona for making a fully fledged dumbass like me somehow sit down and watch this. If you feel a little bit smarter and more capable, we'll endorse you for Excel. If you go and download, subscribe, rate, and review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out on DraftKingsNetwork.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.